son-in-law said, "Your house is perfect for my parents. They move tomorrow, so I prepared." Gabriel didn't even take his shoes off. He stood in my doorway, holding a clipboard like I was a property to be inspected rather than a person to be respected. "It's for everyone's benefit," he added, voice dripping with false consideration. "We're consolidating family resources." "Are we?" I said, setting my teacup down so gently the spoon didn't clink. "I'm Helen Miller, 68 years old, retired school administrator from Juniper Street." Gabriel had been eyeing my mortgage-free bungalow for months, but that morning he finally revealed his true intentions. Standing in my living room, the same room where I'd mentored generations of neighborhood children, he informed me I was being relocated to a temporary apartment while his parents took over my home. The moving truck was already scheduled for Saturday. What Gabriel didn't know was that those neighborhood children had grown up. They'd become lawyers, judges, city councilors, doctors, and military officers. And they were about to show him exactly what happens when you threaten the woman who helped shape their lives. I watched him outline his timeline with corporate efficiency. Thursday announcement, Friday packing, Saturday relocation. He'd planned my displacement down to the hour. That's when I realized I needed to make those calls. Gabriel had been dismissing me for 2 years, ever since he married my daughter. From the beginning, he made it clear my home was more interesting to him than my place in the family. "You don't need all this space," he'd say whenever he visited, eyes measuring the rooms. "My parents could really use a place like this." What he never bothered to notice was the bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars where 9-year-old Amber, my late niece's daughter, had finally found stability. After months of uncertainty, he never asked about my kinship care license tied specifically to this address. He never, after considered that this little yellow bungalow wasn't just my home, but Amber's safe haven. Friday night at the neighborhood potluck, Gabriel announced it publicly, his voice too bright as he told our neighbors, "We're moving Helen to a cozy apartment tomorrow. My parents need a place near the hospital. It just makes sense." I took a breath and said nothing. There's a kind of power in letting someone reveal exactly what they think of you. Then I went home and prepared. Because Gabriel was about to learn the difference between a house and a home. He was about to discover what a community looks like when it stands together. And he was about to find out what happens when you threaten the stability of a child and the dignity of an elder who has spent decades building an invisible network of care. The moment Gabriel left my driveway, I went to my desk and opened the top drawer where I keep the truth property deeds, insurance paperwork, and my active kinship care license. Not weapons, but shields. I'd been collecting them my whole life. My first call was to Andrew Peters. 28 years ago, he'd been a gangly 14-year-old who couldn't look anyone in the eye. Now he practiced family law with a voice that never raised but always reached exactly where it needed to go. "Miss Miller," he answered on the first ring. "This is unexpected." "Andrew, I need your help," I said, and explained Gabriel's declaration. "He thinks this house will be his wife's inheritance someday, so he's moving me out now for his parents' convenience." "Send me a scan of your deed and your kinship license paperwork," he replied after a thoughtful pause. "And Miss Miller, don't argue with him in public." Let me. I wasn't planning to argue at all. Even better. The next texts fanned out like a net thrown wide but true. To Steve Brown, once a troubled 7th grader who'd organized his first petition in my kitchen, now representing District 3 on the city council. To Dr. Amber Okafor, who'd arrived at my door at 13 with a science textbook and determination, now a pediatric surgeon whose name matched my little Amber's by beautiful coincidence. To Major Zoe Martinez, who'd been the shyest girl in the neighborhood until she discovered debate club, now logistics officer in the U.S. Army. To Sophie Lee, who'd started babysitting the block's children when she was 15, now running 3 local daycares. To Anthony Reed, who'd written his first article at my dining table and still called me Miss Miller when he wanted to make me smile, now a journalist at the local paper. Names and faces that once belonged to children at my kitchen table became signatures on emails that could move mountains. I asked only for presence, not intervention. A quiet, dignified showing. "We'll be there," came the replies, one after another. Not questions, just confirmations. Andrew called back at 10 p.m., his voice careful but certain. "I've reviewed everything, Miss Miller. Moving, you would disrupt a license placement," he said. "The kinship care license is site-specific. You have occupancy rights. If Gabriel tries to physically remove you or Amber, he's in serious legal jeopardy." "Good," I said, watching the stars on Amber's ceiling through her open door as she slept. "But we're not going to scare him with jargon. We're going to teach him with daylight." "What do you mean?" "Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. I need people in professional attire. No shouting, no drama, just presence and truth." I heard the smile in Andrew's voice. "Like the time you made Tommy Jackson apologize to the library by having him read his paper in front of everyone he'd disrespected? Exactly like that. Public accountability isn't about humiliation, it's about education." Andrew was quiet for a moment. "I'll bring the legal paperwork. Jeremy should be there too, not as a judge but as your son." "Family matters. Tell him to bring his credentials anyway," I said. Gabriel responds to titles. After we hung things up, I drafted one last message to my network, laying out the plan. Saturday, 8:30 a.m. professional dress, placards with names and titles, quiet presence along my front walk. No confrontation, just witness. Major Martinez replied with military precision. "Confirmed. Positioning map attached. Arrival sequence established." Sophie added, "I'll bring coffee for everyone. This is a community matter." Anthony, "Documentation only. Not exploitation." By midnight, my phone hummed with confirmations from people I'd taught to write essays and fill out job applications, people who now ran departments and managed teams and saved lives. Some I hadn't seen in years, but distance hadn't weakened the threads connecting us. I slipped into Amber's room to check on her one last time. Her stuffed fox peeked out from under the covers, his button eyes catching the dim glow of the stars. I'd promised her stability, and I intended to keep that promise. I asked for presents, not war, and every reply said yes. Friday evening arrived with the gentle predictability of tradition. The Juniper Street Neighborhood Association had gathered for monthly potlucks since before some of the younger residents were born. This time, folding tables lined Mrs. Abernathy's backyard, white string lights crisscrossed overhead like stars brought low for inspection, and the scent of 20 different family recipes mingled in the cooling autumn air. I brought my usual 2 pans of lasagna, one with meat and one without. The recipe hadn't changed in 30 years, and neither had the empty pans I carried home afterward. "Helen, Mrs. Abernathy called as I arrived. "We saved you a spot at the main table. Amber's already playing with the new Gen twins by the swing set." I settled into my usual chair, smoothing my napkin across my lap, exchanging quiet hellos with neighbors who'd watched each other's children grow up, put in wheelchair ramps for aging parents, collected mail during hospital stays, people who knew the rhythm of community isn't in grand gestures, but in the reliable presence of porch lights and borrowed cups of sugar. Gabriel arrived 30 minutes late with his parents trailing behind like hesitant shadows. They'd visited twice before, pleasant people with uncertain smiles who seemed perpetually surprised by their son's confidence. Tonight, Gabriel wore the same expression he'd had in my living room, a man with plans too important to question. He filled his plate, navigated to the center table, and stood, rather than sat, ensuring everyone could see him. His phone glowed in his hand like a modern clipboard, bathing his face in blue light as he scrolled through what I assumed was his schedule for dismantling my life. "I wanted to share some family news," he announced, voice pitched to Carrie. Conversations quieted. Forks paused mid-bite. "We're moving Helen to a cozy apartment tomorrow." The way he said it, like announcing a promotion or a vacation, brought a stillness to the tables. Mrs. Liu, who'd taught piano to half the neighborhood children over the decades, lowered her deviled egg with deliberate care. "My parents need a place near the hospital," Gabriel continued, gesturing to his uncomfortable-looking mother and father. "It just makes sense for them to use Mom's house instead of signing another lease across town." "Mom," he hadn't called me that in months. Not since I'd questioned his business practices at a family dinner. Now the word was a permission slip, a verbal sleight of hand to transform appropriation into altruism. "The movers will be there at 9, he continued, tapping his phone screen. "Everything's arranged. It's actually a really nice apartment complex. Activities, maintenance staff, shuttle service to the grocery store." "Mr. Rodriguez," whose grandson I'd helped apply for college scholarships last year, cleared his throat. That's quite sudden, isn't it? Helen's been on Juniper Street for decades. Change is hard at her age, Gabriel nodded with manufactured sympathy. That's why we've handled all the details. Less stress that way. The aunties, what we called the circle of older women who formed the neighborhood's emotional backbone, went completely silent. Anyone who knew them recognized this as the sound that comes before a storm. Anthony caught my eye from across the table, his reporter's instinct registering the tension. His thumb moved across his phone screen, and seconds later, Steve's message lit up my pocket. We're ready. You didn't mention this was happening, Helen, Mrs. Abernathy said, her voice careful. Are you excited about the move? All eyes turned to me. Gabriel's smile remained fixed, but something flickered behind his eyes, the first recognition that I might not play the role he'd assigned me in his production. I took a slow sip of iced tea, letting the silence lengthen, remembering Andrew's advice not to argue in public. The power wasn't in contradiction, but in refusing to validate the premise. Helen, Mrs. Abernathy prompted. I set my glass down with a small smile. I appreciate everyone's concern. So it's all arranged then? Gabriel pressed, needing my confirmation to cement his narrative. They turned to me for an answer. I gave them a promise instead. You'll see. After the potluck, I walked home with Amber's small hand in mine, her stuffed fox dangling from her other arm. The street was quiet, except for the distant sound of crickets and the occasional car passing beyond our neighborhood. Inside, I set about the work that couldn't wait for morning. Are we really moving tomorrow? Amber asked, her voice small as she sat at the kitchen table, watching me gather papers from my filing cabinet. No, sweetheart, I said, setting down the stack to look her in the eyes. This is our home. I promised you that when you came to live with me, and I keep my promises. Her brow furrowed. But Mr. Gabriel said, Mr. Gabriel doesn't make decisions about our home, I explained, gentling my tone to remove any trace of the anger I felt. Only I can do that, and I've decided we're staying right here with your stars and your window seat and your fox. She nodded, uncertainty still shadowing her face. 11 months was long enough to start believing in stability, but not quite long enough to trust it wouldn't vanish. I knew that tightrope walk intimately, had watched dozens of children balance on it over the years. I pulled out the deed to my house, my kinship care license documentation, and Amber's placement paperwork. While the copier hummed, I assembled folders, one for Andrew, one for the front hall table, one to keep in my handbag. Paper armor, bureaucracy transformed from obstacle to protection. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Okafor. Just checking. How is young Amber handling this? I can come early tomorrow to sit with her if needed. Children's anxiety manifests physically sometimes. I smiled at the care threaded through her medical terminology. She's concerned but steady. I typed back. Your presence tomorrow will help more than you know. Major Martinez's detailed coordination came through, next a diagram of the street with X's marking where each car should park. Arrival times staggered between 8:15 and 8:45. AM positions noted for maximum visibility from both the street and my front walk. Chessboard at dawn, she'd written at the bottom. Pieces in position before the opponent arrives. While my phone charged on the counter, I moved to the porch, setting out chairs in a loose semicircle. Not confrontational, but intentional. I swept away the fallen leaves, wiped down the railings, and positioned a small table where Andrew could spread his paperwork. The night air carried the scent of autumn, a reminder that seasons change, but some things remain. Inside again, I found Amber in her pajamas, standing in her doorway. Can't sleep? I asked. She shook her head. Is Mr. Gabriel mad at us? I led her back to bed, sitting on the edge as she arranged her fox just so. The glow-in-the-dark stars cast gentle green light across her worried face. Mr. Gabriel isn't thinking about us, I explained carefully. He's thinking about a house, not the people who live in it. But tomorrow, we're going to help him understand the difference. How? By showing him our family. Her brow furrowed again. But we don't have a big family. Just you and me and Uncle Jeremy. I smoothed her hair back. Family isn't just who lives with you or who shares your blood. It's the people who show up when it matters. who help you grow and learn and feel safe. And we have more of those people than you might think. She considered this, eyes drifting to the stars on her ceiling. Will they all fit on our porch? We'll make room, I promised with a smile. That's what family does. After Amber finally drifted off, I returned to the kitchen where the extra lasagna pans from the potluck sat cooling. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but neighbors would still need to eat. I wrapped them carefully and labeled each with names: the Rodriguez family, Mrs. Liu, the Nguyens with their twins. In my bedroom, I laid out my gray skirt suit, not worn since my retirement party, but appropriate for the occasion. Next to it, I placed my school administrator's pin, a small golden apple that had once seemed sentimental, but now felt like necessary identification. By morning, the porch would be ready to teach. Saturday morning dawned with the clarity that follows a night of purpose. I'd been awake since 5, making coffee, arranging papers, and setting out the fresh muffins Sophie had dropped off the night before. The fog lifted from Juniper Street just as the clock struck 7, revealing a day too beautiful for confrontation, but perfect for truth. Amber emerged from her room at 7:30, already dressed in the outfit she'd laid out herself, her important day clothes, she called them. A blue dress with pockets, white cardigan, and the small pendant her mother had left her. You look wonderful, I told her, helping her with the clasp of the necklace. Is our family coming soon? She asked, peering out the window. Very soon, I promised, and right on cue, my phone buzzed with Major Martinez's message. First wave departing. ETA, 8:20. We ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, watching the minute hand make its steady journey toward 8. I'd explained to Amber, as gently as possible, what would happen today, that some people might say unkind things, that there might be tension, but that she was safe and our home was protected. Like a castle with invisible walls? She'd asked. Like a community with visible hearts, I'd replied. At precisely 8:15, the first car arrived, Andrew Peters stepping out of a silver sedan, briefcase in hand, his suit as crisp as his expression was composed. He walked up the path with measured steps, nodding to Amber, who watched from the window. The paperwork is prepared, he said as I opened the door. Judge Haynes is 3 minutes behind me. True to Andrew's word, my son's black SUV pulled up moments later. Jeremy emerged in his charcoal suit, his judge's demeanor firmly in place despite the personal nature of the gathering. He held a simple white placard. Judge Jeremy Haynes, Superior Court. Mom, he said, embracing me briefly. Legal stance is solid. We're documenting everything. By 8:30, sedans and SUVs lined Juniper Street like a processional, each one discharging its occupant with quiet purpose. Dr. Amber Okafor in her white coat, stethoscope around her neck, placard reading, Dr. Amber Okafor, Pediatric Surgery. Councilman Steve Brown, with his distinctive red tie and a placard identifying him as Councilman Steve Brown, District 3. Major Zoe Martinez in full uniform, her military bearing unmistakable. Her placard stating, Major Zoe Martinez, U.S. Army. Sophie Lee arrived with a cart of coffee and pastries, her placard announcing, Sophie Lee, Early Childhood Network. Anthony Reed, camera in hand, stood slightly apart, his press credentials visible, his placard reading, Anthony Reed, City Reporter, Metro Desk. Each took their position along the walkway and lawn, not forming a barrier but creating a presence. Not a protest, but a witness. Each placard held at chest-level names and titles, becoming living citations of authority and care. Neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the unusual assembly. Mrs. Liu in her housecoat, Mr. Rodriguez with his morning coffee. The Nguyen twins perched on bicycle handlebars as their father held them steady. They gathered at the edges, murmuring questions that my assembled family answered with quiet explanations. Is that really Judge Haynes? Isn't that the councilman from the east side? That's Dr. Okafor. She operated on my nephew last year. Young Amber stood beside me on the porch, her hand tucked into mine, her fox peeking from her cardigan pocket. Dr. Okafor approached, kneeling to meet her at eye level. Hello, Amber, she said warmly. I've been looking forward to meeting you. I hear you like stars. Amber nodded, a small, fierce nod that contained more courage than many adults manage in a lifetime. Me too, Doctor. Okafor smiled. Maybe you can show me your collection later? As they spoke, Steve motioned toward the street corner, where two figures in city uniforms stepped from an unmarked car. Building inspectors, he said quietly. Just to verify occupancy rights and zoning. Precautionary. The scene had assembled itself with the precision of a theater production, each person knowing their mark, their role, the weight of their presence. Not to intimidate, but to educate. Not weapons, but witnesses. At 8:55, heads turned at the sound of a diesel engine. The moving truck appeared at the far end of Juniper Street, its white bulk gleaming in the morning sunday. As it approached, the driver's eyes widened, taking in the assembly of suits and uniforms, the placards with their professional credentials, the quiet authority that lined my front lawn. The truck slowed to a crawl. The moving truck paused at the edge of my property, driver's window rolling down as the man inside surveyed the scene with professional wariness. A second vehicle, Gabriel's sleek black sedan, pulled up behind it, parking with an abruptness that suggested irritation even before a door opened. Gabriel emerged first, his face cycling through expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally, anger. His parents followed more slowly, their embarrassment evident in hunched shoulders and averted eyes. "What is this?" Gabriel demanded, striding up the walkway as if the line of professionals were merely decorative. He stopped short when Andrew stepped forward, hand extended not in greeting but in the universal signal for pause. "You're making a scene," Gabriel hissed at me, voice low but carrying in the morning stillness. "We're making a record," I replied, my voice steady as the foundations of my home. Andrew stepped forward, calm as a Sunday morning. "Mr. Gabriel," he said, not unkindly, "Miss Miller holds legal title to this property. She has a current kinship care placement tied specifically to this address." He lifted a folder. "Any forced relocation would constitute unlawful interference with custody and potentially elder abuse. We have filed notice with the court. I advise you to cancel the truck." Gabriel's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. We're just trying to help her downsize to somewhere more appropriate for her age. This is a family matter." "Precisely," Andrew nodded. "And Miss Miller's family includes young Amber, whose placement is legally protected at this address." Jeremy cleared his throat, stepping forward with judicial precision. "As an officer of the court," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his position, despite his personal connection, "I will not preside over this informally on my court, mother's lawn. But let me be plain. If you proceed with this attempt to relocate Miss Miller against her will, there will be immediate injunctive relief sought. You do not have the legal right you believe you have." "You can't," Gabriel began, but Councilman Brown interjected with practiced political smoothness. "While we're here," he said, gesturing toward the city inspectors who were making notes on clipboards, "we'll verify that any future multi-generational occupancy adheres to code. This street is not zoned for boarding house conversions, which is what your proposal would technically constitute." Gabriel turned to his parents as if seeking reinforcement, but they had drifted back toward the street, their discomfort palpable. "Mom," he said to me, attempting to reclaim the narrative, "these are strangers. This is our business, our family." "No strangers here," I said quietly, "just people who understand what family means." Dr. Okafor, who had been kneeling beside young Amber on the porch steps, stood and approached. Her white coat gleamed in the morning sun, stethoscope around her neck, like a badge of office. "You good, sweetheart?" she asked Amber, who nodded that same fierce little nod. The doctor turned to Gabriel. "As a pediatrician, I'm concerned about the disruption to Amber's stability. Attachment and environment are crucial factors in child development following trauma." "This isn't about the kid," Gabriel snapped, patience fraying. "It's entirely about her," Dr. Okafor replied with professional calm, "and about respecting elder autonomy. Both matter to this community." The moving truck driver had exited his vehicle and now approached, clipboard in hand. A solid man with forearms like bridge cables. His name tag read, "Peter." "Excuse me," he said, addressing no one in particular. "I need the homeowner to sign the work order before we start loading anything." Gabriel gestured impatiently. "That's what we're handling now." Peter's eyes traveled from Gabriel to me, then to the assembled professionals with their placards, and finally to the city inspectors making notes. "So you're not the homeowner?" he asked Gabriel directly. "Not technically, but we're not crossing this line without a signed work order from the actual homeowner," Peter said, tapping his clipboard. "Company policy, hard line." He looked at me. "Ma'am, are you authorizing us to pack and move your belongings today?" "No," I said clearly. "I am not." Peter nodded, unsurprised. "Then we're at an impasse." He turned to Gabriel. "Sir, I recommend rescheduling when you have proper authorization." Gabriel's face darkened. "I booked you weeks ago. I paid a deposit, which we'll refund, minus the cancellation fee." Peter was already walking back to his truck. "Call the office Monday." Gabriel's parents approached him now, his mother's hand light on his arm. "Gabriel," she whispered, though the morning air carried her words. "This isn't right. We didn't agree to back this." She looked toward me, shame flushing her face. "We would never want to displace anyone. You said she had agreed." "Call it off," his father added, voice firm with unexpected authority. "Now." For a moment, Gabriel stood frozen between impulse and consequence, ambition and reality. Then his shoulders sagged infinitesimally, the universal posture of retreat disguised as reconsideration. He pulled out his phone, dialed, and spoke tightly. "Turn around. We're postponing." To Peter, already in his cab, he called. "You can go." The moving truck's engine rumbled to life, the great white vehicle executing a careful three-point turn before rumbling away down Juniper Street. The line of luxury sedans and SUVs remained, their occupants standing like sentinels along my walkway. Gabriel's parents approached the porch steps, faces drawn with embarrassment. "Miss Miller," his mother said softly, "I'm so sorry. We didn't know. He told us you were eager to move." "I'm not," I said simply. "This is my home. And Amber's." "Of course," she nodded, tears in her eyes. "Of course it is." She turned to her son. "We're leaving now." As they walked back to Gabriel's car, Andrew stepped closer to me. "You've made your point without a single raised voice," he said with quiet approval. "I've filed the paperwork anyway, just in case." "Thank you," I said, watching as Gabriel's car pulled away, his parents in the back seat like chastened children. Anthony lifted his camera for a final shot, not of Gabriel's retreat, but of our assembly. "Not scandal," he said quietly. "Context." And that's exactly what we'd provided, a lesson in context, delivered with dignity on a sunlit lawn. By Sunday afternoon, Anthony's article appeared in the online edition of the city paper. "Community rallies as kinship guardian resists unlawful eviction." The piece was measured, factual, and absent of sensationalism, a rarity in modern reporting. He had included a photo of the assembled professionals with their placards, standing like a living wall of competence and care. The caption read simply, "Former students and mentees of Helen Miller gather to support elder dignity and kinship placement stability." You didn't use the word confrontation once. I told him when he called to check my reaction. "Because it wasn't one," Anthony replied. "It was a correction. That's different." I hadn't expected the story to travel beyond our local paper, but by Monday morning, Anthony's video clip showing the dignified line of professionals, the moving truck's retreat, and Amber's small, brave figure on the porch had been shared across several social platforms. Not as a scandal or public shaming, but as what Anthony had called it, context. Major Martinez texted me a link to a parenting forum where the video had sparked a discussion about kinship care and elder dignity. "You're trending in the best possible way," she wrote. "This is how change happens, one visible example at a time." On Tuesday, the plans the side have presented. Neighborhood Association released a statement supporting kinship care arrangements, emphasizing their importance for community stability. They announced a workshop series on elder rights and resources to be held monthly at the community center. Mrs. Abernathy called to ask if I would consider speaking at the first session. "Just a few words about your experience," she encouraged. "People need to hear from someone who's lived it." By Wednesday, more surprising news arrived via Steve, who called during his lunch break. "Helen, I thought you should know. Gabriel's contracting company is under investigation." "What? Why?" I hadn't wished financial hardship on Gabriel, despite everything. Anonymous tips about code violations on recent projects. Apparently, several of his renovations skipped required inspections. Nothing to do with our situation, Steve clarified quickly. This would have happened eventually. The shortcuts were real. The timing is just convenient. By Friday, Gabriel's contractor license had been suspended pending review. Sophie, who seemed to know everyone's business through her daycare network, reported that 3 of his clients had canceled projects upon hearing the news. "I'm not celebrating another person's downfall," I told her when she visited that afternoon. "Of course not," Sophie agreed, setting down a box of children's books for Amber. "But accountability isn't punishment, it's course correction, like what we did on the lawn." Sophie had been busy in other ways that week. She'd worked with the neighborhood association to establish a foster family fund in my name, designed to support kinship caregivers with emergency needs, home repairs, medical costs not covered by insurance, educational supplies. "The donations are already coming in," she reported. "People want to help. They just need to know how." Through it all, I kept to my routines. I helped Amber with her science project, attended Mrs. Liu's piano recital for her students, and baked 3 extra pans of lasagna for the Rodriguez family when their grandmother came to stay after a hospital discharge. The loudest statement I made was feeding my neighbors the work I'd always done. Gabriel's parents called once, their apology genuine if uncomfortable. "We found a condo near the hospital," his mother said. "We're signing the lease tomorrow." She paused before adding, "Gabriel isn't handling this well. His father and we've tried to explain." "Understanding takes time," I replied, not unkindly. "And sometimes, consequences." On Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after our lawn assembly, an official letter arrived. The county court had scheduled a guardianship hearing for Amber. The caseworker had accelerated the process in light of recent events, noting that stability was clearly in the child's best interest. I set the letter on my desk, next to the framed photo Anthony had sent our assembly of quiet strength captured in morning light. Not a battle won, but a boundary honored. Later that afternoon, as I pulled fresh bread from the oven, I noticed a moving truck parked in front of the Rodriguez house. Not white like the one Gabriel had sent, but warm red, with family owned since 1974, painted on the side. Grandmother Rodriguez was coming to stay permanently, it seemed. Families finding their way home, the work continued, as it always had on Juniper Street. The courtroom where Amber's guardianship was formalized had the hushed dignity of places where life changes become official. Judge Marilyn Santos, not my Jeremy, who had properly recused himself, wore her authority lightly, her voice warm as she addressed Amber directly. "Do you understand what guardianship means, young lady?" Amber, in her blue dress with the pockets, stood straight beside me. Her fox remained at home, but her courage had come along. "It means Aunt Helen is my family forever, not just for now." Judge Santos smiled. "That's exactly right." She turned to me. "Miss Miller, the court finds you eminently qualified for permanent guardianship of Amber Wilson. The kinship care license will convert to permanent guardianship status, effective immediately." The words echoed in the wood-paneled room, permanent, effective immediately. The paper catching up to what our hearts had known for months. Outside the courthouse, Andrew shook my hand with formal pleasure. "Congratulations, Miss Miller," though I never doubted the outcome. "Next step is adoption," I confided, "when Amber is ready." He nodded. "Just call. The paperwork will be waiting." The weeks that followed brought changes to our yellow bungalow, physical manifestations of permanence. Carlos, Mr. Rodriguez's son-in-law, who worked in construction, installed grab bars in the bathroom and a gently sloped ramp alongside the porch steps. "Not because you need them now," he explained as he worked, "but so the elders can visit easier, and you won't have to worry later." The accessibility upgrades transformed our home into a gathering place. Thursdays became Domino's Day, with Mr. Peters shuffling the tiles with arthritic but precise fingers. Mrs. Lee arrived each Sunday after church with steaming bamboo baskets of bao, teaching Amber to pleat the dough with patient hands. "This is how we did it in my village," she explained, her accent thickening with memory. "Food is family's first language." In Amber's room, I installed a new bookshelf with Jeremy's help, solid oak, that would last decades. The top shelf bore a small wooden plaque, "To grow into." For the books that are still too hard, I I explained to Amber, but won't always be. She traced the letters with her finger. Like people, she said with unexpected wisdom. Sometimes they need to grow into being better, too. With Sophie's organizational genius and Steve's municipal connections, we established the Juniper Street Scholarship Fund. Not just for college, though that would come, but for vocational training, certification, programs, emergency education needs. Sometimes a $500 car repair is all that stands between a parent and their degree, Sophie explained at the launch meeting in our living room. We're removing obstacles, not just paying tuition. The fund's first recipient was Mrs. Nguyen's nephew, who needed specialized tools for his electrician apprenticeship. The second was a single father from 2 streets over, whose nursing program required uniforms he couldn't afford after paying childcare. The work expanded, quiet but steady, like roots growing beneath a street. As October yielded to November, the trees along Juniper Street flamed into color, then surrendered their leaves to the cooling earth. One crisp afternoon, as the light thinned and made everything honest, a shadow fell across our porch window. I looked up from helping Amber with her homework to see a familiar silhouette, Gabriel standing hat in hand, alone at our door. I opened the door to find Gabriel without his clipboard, without his certainty, without the smooth corporate posture that had defined him since I'd known him. The autumn wind rustled leaves across the porch, a few catching against his shoes he carefully wiped on the mat before stepping inside when I motioned him in. "Miss Miller," he said, his voice different, humbled, perhaps, or simply honest for the first time. "Thank you for seeing me." In the living room, Amber glanced up from her homework, her expression guarded. "It's okay," I assured her. "Why don't you finish that in your room? I'll call you when we're done." She gathered her papers with deliberate care, walking past Gabriel without acknowledgement. The soft click of her bedroom door followed. "Please sit," I said, gesturing to the chair across from mine, not the comfortable one by the window, but the straight-backed one reserved for brief visits. Gabriel perched on its edge, hat still in hand, turning it slowly as if reading instructions written in the brim. "I'm sorry," he said, finally, the words emerging whole and unadorned. "I lost my way. I thought I was protecting my parents, securing their future. I didn't see you. You saw a house," I replied. "Not a home." He nodded, eyes finally meeting mine. "What can I do?" The question hung between us, not a negotiation, but a recognition that words alone could not bridge what had been broken. "You can tell the truth to the same people who heard the lie," I said. "At the next neighborhood association meeting, you will explain what you attempted and why it was wrong, not just legally, but morally." Gabriel swallowed but nodded. "And you can serve," I continued. "Steve's office runs a home repair program for seniors who can't afford maintenance. You have skills they need. Volunteer every Saturday for a year. Quietly. No photos, no credit, no business connections." "I will," he said, and for the first time since I'd known him, his voice carried no angle, no hidden calculation. "Then I forgive you," I said, and meant it the way you mean a contract you intend to enforce. He stood to leave, hat still in hand, looking smaller somehow but more substantial. At the door, he paused. "My parents found a place. They're settled now. I'm glad," I said sincerely. "Family should be near when needed." "Yes," he agreed quietly. "I'm learning what that means." After he left, I called Amber back. She emerged cautiously, her stuffed fox clutched against her chest. "Is he gone?" she asked. "Yes. He came to apologize and to learn." She considered this with the gravity children reserve for adult complexity. "Did you forgive him?" "I did," I said, drawing her close as we settled on the couch. "With conditions." "Like homework," she nodded sagely. "You have to show your work." Above us, through the window, the first stars appeared in the deepening sky. The porch light clicked on automatically, casting its warm glow across our front steps where so many had stood in support. When Mr. Gabriel said, "They move." "Tomorrow, what did you prepare?" Amber asked, looking up at me with curious eyes. I smiled, brushing back her hair. "My people, my paperwork, my porch." I prepared the truth. She nodded, satisfied with this answer, and returned to her homework, secure in the knowledge that our little yellow bungalow on Juniper Street remained what it had always been. A place where people are chosen, and when necessary, taught how to choose better. By spring, when the paperwork for Amber's adoption was finalized, the cherry trees along our street burst into improbable pink glory, and on Saturdays, if you looked carefully at Steve's senior repair program, you might notice Gabriel in work boots, head down, learning to hold ladders, and listen the hardest and most necessary curriculum of all,